Senior Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today because reproductive freedom is under attack. In 2022, Donald Trump's far-right Supreme Court took away the constitutional right to an abortion, completing the Republican Party's decades-long plan to overturn Roe. Now, in some states, the court's decision revived abortion bans that had lain dormant since the 1800s. In other states, the decision triggered new abortion restrictions pre-written to go into effect the very day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. The results have been horrific. But here's the thing the Republican Party missed. From Kansas to Ohio to California, reproductive rights are popular. Americans overwhelmingly support the right to an abortion, the right to IVF, and the right to contraception. In fact, these rights are so popular that Republicans want you to believe they support them. But their actions speak for themselves. First, Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Donald Trump and his extremist Supreme Court did, and Trump is still bragging about it. Now, over 20 states have banned or severely restricted abortion access, passed laws criminalizing doctors who perform abortions, or threatened access to pregnancy care, miscarriage care, fertility assistance, and more. Then, Republicans claimed they wouldn't go after IVF. Just this year, Alabama's Supreme Court virtually outlawed IVF in the state. And just a few weeks later, my colleagues in the Republican Party blocked federal legislation that would protect access to this care. Now, the Republican Party is saying they won't go after contraception. Well, that makes sense, since 92% of Americans support birth control. But guess what? Republicans now have contraception in their sights, and they are even trying to redefine what constitutes contraception. Sure, they support contraception, but not an IUD. Or they're all for contraception, but not Plan B. Contraception is a must, except Republicans in Congress have a bill, quote, the Life at Conception Act, that would give an embryo so-called personhood rights, which would outlaw abortion, outlaw IVF, and yes, outlaw some forms of contraception. That bill has the majority support of the Republican caucus, including Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. On top of that, Republicans blocked Democrats from passing this very same bill to protect the right to contraception last year. But tomorrow, every senator will have to say where they stand, proving that no matter what Republicans say about wanting to support contraception, when it comes down to it, they won't. Tomorrow's vote should be a turning point. It's time we take these Republican lawmakers at their word. Millions of people across this country are already experiencing a new form of hell thanks to Donald Trump and the extremist Supreme Court that overturned Roe. And Black, brown, and low-income communities are feeling a disproportionate impact. So now, as Donald Trump continues to push for a nationwide abortion ban and says he is looking at contraception, Democrats are standing up and fighting back. Already, President Biden and Vice President Harris have taken a series of steps to strengthen access to affordable, high-quality contraception and adequate access to reproductive health care more generally. And tomorrow, I will be joining my Democratic colleagues, led by my partner, Senator Markey, and by Senator Hirono and Senator Duckworth, in voting for the Right to Contraception Act. Birth control is safe, effective, and an important part of reproductive health care. It is time that we fight back against the Republican war against reproductive freedom. It's time we codify the right to contraception into law. I am furious that millions of women have lost fundamental rights. I am furious that their freedom to make their own decisions has been taken away by a small number of extremists. I am alarmed by what the extremist Supreme Court and congressional Republicans are prepared to do to unravel a future of protection for women under a Republican presidency. This is about the right to make decisions about our own bodies and our own futures. It's all on the line, and we need these protections written into law. That is what tomorrow's vote is about. I don't want to hear from Republicans who say they support contraception but can't make it the law of the land. If they really support contraception, then they will vote yes on the bill that comes up tomorrow. If not, actions speak louder than words. They will demonstrate that it's not only going after abortion, it's not only going after IVF, it's also all about going after contraception. These are the decisions women should make for themselves. They should have the freedom to do that. These are not the decisions that should be made by extremist Republican lawmakers. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Let me ask about the abortion issue, because as you know, that's an important one. Here in Pennsylvania, you can get an abortion up to 24 weeks of pregnancy. You have said that states should be free to make their own decisions on this issue. But as you know, there are some on both sides who want federal legislation. So let's be crystal clear on your view, Mr. President. Will you veto any federal legislation that would restrict or curtail Pennsylvanians' current abortion law?
No, I'm not into the federal. I just took it out of federal. We did something that everybody wanted. Everybody said also it couldn't be done. We got rid of Roe v. Wade, which brought it back to the states. For 52 years, that's what people wanted to do. They wanted to bring abortion. They wanted to bring that whole thing back to the states. And then you have your vote. Ohio had a vote. Ohio had a somewhat liberal ending. Also, you know, if you look at what happened, Kansas had a somewhat liberal ending. And some, on the other hand, go a different way. But it's bringing it back to the people. It's the vote of the people within the states, and it's now a states issue. And that's where everybody wanted it to be for many, many years. For 50 years, then I got that done. Now it's the vote of the people. Pennsylvania is one way, and Texas is another way. But that's what the people wanted.
So if Congress passes a 15-week bill, you'd veto it?
I don't think there'd be any reason for it, because all the states are going to have their own. It's very interesting. All of the states now, we just got out of the federal government. They couldn't pass anything. Congress couldn't pass, the Senate couldn't pass, and it's really not up to Congress. It's up to, you know, a whole group of people beyond Congress, in front of and behind. But they wanted to get out of Congress. They wanted to get out of the federal government, and that's what they do. And now the states have taken these issues, and they're going and they're voting. It's really become a vote of the people within the states, and that's what people have wanted, and that's what the legal scholars wanted. Everybody wanted it, and it's calming down. It's really amazing. It's brought this issue, and it's really calmed it down. It's a vote of the people.
So related to this is the whole issue of contraceptives. Do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception?
Well, we're looking at that, and I'm going to have a policy on that very shortly, and I think it's something that you'll find interesting, and it's another issue that's very interesting, but you will find it, I think, very smart. I think it's a smart decision, but we'll be releasing it very soon.
Well, that suggests that you may want to support some restrictions, like the morning after pill or something.
We are also, you know, things really do have a lot to do with the states, and some states are going to have different policies than others. But I'm coming out within a week or so with a very comprehensive policy, which I'll get to you immediately.
Okay, good.
All right, thank you all for coming. and I thank Senators Murray and Markey and Hirono. Well, today is an important anniversary. Exactly 105 years ago, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote for the first time. The 19th Amendment was one of the greatest leaps ever in our march to becoming a more perfect union, and was only possible from decades of sacrifice, of struggle, of persistence, a lot of which started in upstate New York, I'm proud to say. Of course, we honor the countless women who sacrificed, struggled, and persisted, but we're also reminded of the daunting but valiant fight ahead. I am wearing this yellow ribbon. It was given to me by the National Commission on Suffrage that allowed us to go downstairs and look at the original document, first time it showed in the Capitol. But it's in my pocket, not pinned on because the stem broke. Appropriate given what the Supreme Court has done to human rights and women's rights in the last few years. Okay, we're going to carry, so more than a century stands between this generation and the generation that made it possible for women to vote. But in many ways, we still share their struggle for greater justice and equality. We still carry the same moral duty they bore to make our nation a more faithful reflection of our founding ideals. The march for equality for women and for all Americans is certainly not over, as the broken stem indicates, and that is why we Senate Democrats are going to continue to fight for women's freedoms this week, including a vote on the right to contraception. When women are told by hard-right politicians that their health care decisions are not theirs to make, the march is still not over. On this 105th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, we must confront the ugly truth that women sadly have fewer freedoms than they did just a few years ago. So tomorrow, the Senate will defend the freedom of choice with a vote on the Right to Contraception Act led by Markey and Hirono. Federal protections for contraceptives are a critical piece of protecting women's reproductive freedoms. This legislation would codify the right to conception into federal law. As MAGA Republicans continue to block protections for access to contraceptives at the state level, there are several states where the legislature is in the process of doing that right now. It is vital we protect contraception at the federal level, prevent the states from doing this. To those who think that federal action protecting access to birth control is not vital, they are wrong. Republicans are openly blocking these protections in states across the country. And there's going to be more action to come. Last night, I began the Rule 14 process for the Right to IVF Act, led by Senators Duckworth and Murray and Booker, to place it on the legislative calendar and make it available to consideration on the floor. I intend to bring this legislation protecting access to IVF up for a vote very soon. Millions of Americans have relied on IVF to have children, but after a stunningly radical decision by the Alabama Supreme Court that jeopardized access to IVF, families are rightfully worried that this option be stripped away. Go to any place in America and talk to women, and this is one of the things they're talking about. So Senate Democrats will act to safeguard and strengthen IVF access for all Americans so that everyone has the chance to start a family. In coming weeks, we will put reproductive freedoms and women's rights front and center before this chamber in hopes that we can do what we did 105 years ago, create a more perfect union. Senator Murray.
Well, earlier today I chaired a HELP committee hearing on the damage and cruelty that Republicans' anti-abortion policies have caused over the past 2 years since the Dobbs decision. The shockwaves from Republicans' war on abortion are not dying down. Rather, they are getting louder day by day. Because every day, another woman in this country learns the abortion that she needs is now hundreds of miles and thousands of dollars out of reach. Every day, another woman is confronted with the agonizing reality that she does not have control over her own body, that Republican politicians are forcing her to remain pregnant no matter what and denying her the reproductive care that she needs with sometimes dangerous and even fatal consequences. At our hearing today, we heard the reality of how the chaos and heartbreak caused by Republican abortion bans is growing day by day. And we saw how Republicans are still trying to deny the horrific realities that they have created. They're not just trying to ignore the harm they've done, they're continuing to peddle dangerous disinformation about abortion, push even more extreme attacks on reproductive rights, and pretend the most unhinged policies are somehow moderate, that the most unimaginable tragedies are somehow humane. The American people are not buying it. Women's experiences are too personal for Republicans to spin, and the record of the Republican Party is too clear for them to deny. Over half of House Republicans support fetal personhood becoming law of the land. That is at the extreme in the extreme. It would mean a nationwide ban on abortion, nationwide from conception. It would ban emergency contraception like Plan B. It would ban IUDs. You should ask Republicans what the heck women with IUDs right now are supposed to do. It would upend IVF access, as we saw in Alabama, and in some states it would make women who get abortions eligible for the death penalty. That is the policy that the majority of House Republicans have endorsed, including the Speaker. No one should write this off. No one should buy Republicans' attempts to downplay it. Everyone knows actions speak louder than words. Supporting that bill is an action, and it's a loud one. Well, another opportunity for action is coming up this week. Tomorrow, the Senate will vote on the Right to Contraception Act. The message here is a simple one. Do you support the right to contraception or not? The vast majority of Americans absolutely do, overwhelmingly. But what about Republicans? One of the Republican witnesses at our hearing this morning, someone Republicans chose to bring in to represent their arguments, is actively working to ban basic forms of contraception. That should tell you a lot. Senate Democrats believe every woman has a right to contraception, whether it's the pill or Plan B or an IUD. What could be more common sense and more uncomplicated? So tomorrow, every single Senate Republican will be put on the record about where they stand on access to contraception. You can bet the American people will be watching closely. And whatever the outcome, you can bet Democrats are going to keep fighting to restore abortion rights across our country and protect women's reproductive rights across the board. Thank you.